All right, welcome everybody. So first thing I'll mention is the Western Surgical Foundation. So we are looking to do more things with the foundation in terms of supporting not only the current activities, the OUST Award and the Noni Lowry Speaker, but also looking to expand that to other things in the future, like covering potentially residents and students to travel. So we appreciate all the support to make those things happen. All right, well, I'm super excited about this debate. It's certainly not a conventional, and I appreciate the courage of our speakers who are going to give their opinion on these topics, which I certainly think are controversial. And we've left plenty of time for discussion because we know folks here in the audience will have opinions as well that'll be useful. So the first pro-con debate will be incentivizing the peer review process. Pro was assigned or requested Melissa Hogue, and con Sherry Wren. So Melissa's going to go first. Dr. Hogue is the director of HPB surgery at North Shore University Hospital and director of advanced robotic training for the Granger Center for Simulation and Innovation. She did her medical school and residency training at Northwestern University in Chicago and her fellowship and master's in medical and education and clinical research at the University of Pittsburgh. She's faculty of the University of Chicago Pittsburgh School of Medicine and serves as Associate Program Director of the General Surgery Residency and Complex General Surgical Oncology Fellowship. Dr. Hogue's clinical practice specializes in abdominal cancer and has a focus in minimally invasive gastrointestinal surgery and performs robotic hepatobiliary surgery. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for the privilege of the podium. And as he said, I'm going to be talking incentivizing the peer review process, and I'm the pro. Can we get the volume up? Sorry about that. All right, I do have a disclosure to my institution from Intuitive. So,
hello. Hi, this is the prestigious academic journal, Nature. Oh, hi. Congratulations, you have been selected to review an article for our upcoming issue. Okay, how does it work? Oh, all you have to do is stop everything you're currently doing and spend hours to days working on this. Hours to days? Do I get paid to do this? No. This is a volunteer honor. You're progressing scientific discovery.
So how much free time do you have on a daily or weekly basis? If your time is worth money, vote for Hogue. So what I could tell you is an honor is sharing the stage with the prestigious Sherry Wren. Looking her up, I mean, a ton of administrative accomplishments, a lot of honors and awards. She's been put on boards and organizations and committees everywhere, and a do-gooder all over the world. Not only that, one of the prestigious Noni Lowry Oration winner. So I could see where this is going, but I'll push through. And our agenda today will be your day job, academic currency, peer review accountability, service for your research, bias, journal profitability, and the pipeline.
But I get paid to progress scientific discovery in my regular job, so why can't I get paid to do this?
So what activities does your current job cover? If you like to get paid and your current job does not pay you to write reviews, vote for Hogue. So what goes into the daily buckets of your job? You know, we have clinical piece, and for a lot of people, this is the mainstay of their compensation. So this is from my contract where I have to do 2 to 3 half days of clinic, 2 to 3 half days in the OR, not to mention medical records, complying with policies, call coverage, et cetera. And so this is mostly what we get paid for. There's also administrative buckets, and stipends need time justification. So for being division chief, I've had to fill out where my time goes, but they acknowledge that this time that you spent and you get paid for the time that you spent. In terms of education, I'm an associate program director of the Surgical Oncology Fellowship and the General Surgery Resident. I sit on the Clinical Competency Committee, the PEC, and mentorship, and for all that, I get nothing. But what I say is no money will change hands, but when you die on your deathbed, you will see total consciousness. So I get that going for me, which is nice. You know, so everyone wants to go into academic medicine, and there's a price to go into academic medicine, and that price is probably mostly non-compensation. So, when I interview people for med school, for residency, for fellowship, or they want jobs, everyone wants to academic medicine, everyone wants to do research, but really, getting paid to do research is hard. Most people want to just keep the research going, and the funding of their lab is a lot more important than maybe personal funding. And so this is looking at NIH funding and surgeons that have NIH funding, and it's single digits and low single digits at that. So this expectation is not one that's going to be fruitful for most of the people out there.
Because it's an honor. We're nature. Yeah, so our impact factor is 49.96. Don't you want to be known as a reviewer for Nature? Well, do I get to be an author on the paper? No. Do I get an acknowledgement of some kind? No. So nobody will know in any way that I've done work for your prestigious journal. Science will know.
So are your peers, your bosses, or even your parents impressed by the number of reviews that you do? So if you think your time, your work, your service is valuable and should be recognized in some way, vote for Hoag. So this is just a sort of overview for getting promoted. So will reviews help you getting promoted? So at our institution, just in general, you have to excellence in patient care, high quality education, administrative leadership, research programs, et cetera. And then when you go on to associate, you need to have internal recognition or impact. When you go to professor, you have to have external, and this could be honors, boards, professional gaps, and editorships. But really a lot of this is talking about the currency in here is papers. And with papers comes reviews, right? And with open access.
Why? Because they have to. What do you mean? Researchers have to publish in order to keep their jobs or get promoted.
So it's a rat race, right? The more you have to publish, the more you have to have peer review, et cetera, et cetera. And the more access there is by open access, the more money there is that goes into the issue. And so editorial boards are sought after position. We could see Dr. Wren on the editorial board for JAMA surgery, impact factor of 14.7. On the surgery editorial board, impact factor 4.3. So I'm sure she'll tell us how the reviews are the service that got her to be as successful as becoming the Sherry Wren.
Okay, look, I'll let you be reviewer number 2. What? Shatter the confidence of other researchers for no reason in particular?
Have you ever felt reviewers took out their anger and frustration on your masterpiece? If you've ever been wronged by reviewer 2, vote for Hoag. Thank you. Been there.
Other people did it for you. You wouldn't be where you are today without reviewers.
This is true, and this is what I struggle with most. Do you struggle with saying yes? Do you struggle with saying no? Do you want to do it all, but you're limited by bandwidth? If so, vote for Hoag. So this is just going through my email the past week. And these are things that just automatically go to trash. And these are just requests from me for being a reviewer, or requests to submit an open access journal article. And these are the ones that actually go through, that made it through, and I had to delete myself. So over 100, and so being, a corresponding author does have its tolls. But some of those are real, right? Some are legitimate requests. This was one from HPB, and I'm on the editorial board. This one's from Annals of Surg Onc, I'm on the editorial board. Journals of Surg Onc, I'm on the editorial board. This is from Annals of Surgery. I'm not on the editorial board, but it's a hate letter because I'm 2 weeks behind on my review. Because really the time keeps adding up, because if you think of reviews, or if you think of all the things you do that are service and volunteer, and what is academic currency and what really matters. So in the same time frame, this abstract submissions to the meetings that you go to, abstract reviews, because you may sit on the committees for those, paper submissions, that are reviews requested by the journals that you're on the editorial board for that, and then the presentations, this one including other ones. So how do you balance this? How do you prioritize? And if the reviews are really an invisible honor, how much bandwidth should you put into that? So I'm just gonna check your pulse really quick. All right, you're not there yet, and I don't have Bob Sugar on the line, but I got Sherry Wren waiting to get to the podium for her 12 minutes to talk, all right?
Excuse me. Paying people to review articles introduces significant bias. It taints the process of scientific discovery.
So does the system we have right now, is there an elimination or a minimization of bias? Do you think having a salary or stipend gives you more of an obligation to minimize bias? If so, vote for Hope. So is the current process biased? If you were asked to to review a manuscript for your friend, colleague, your mentor, your mentee, is there an element of bias to that? Do they ask you that and have you deny that? What about the content? If you're asked to review manuscripts about stuff you love, like robot whipples, or stuff you hate, like HIPEC for pancreas cancer, are you automatically biased towards that paper? And does getting paid change that? So if you were going to reject it because you have no time, but you say, okay, well, I'm going to get some money, I'll do it. Then do you do a thorough job? Or, when you're providing this service and you have all these other things that have time commitments, is this go to the low end of the totem pole and that you don't do a thorough job because you're strapped for time and cash?
You're saying allowing people to profit off of research introduces an unacceptable level of bias. Yes, absolutely. You, a journal run by a multi-billion-dollar publishing company who charges academic libraries thousands of dollars for a subscription and individual researchers thousands of dollars for open access articles, are claiming that profit results in an unacceptable level of bias.
So journals are making money. Is everyone else making money? It's a difficult time for healthcare. Does your institution have unlimited CME funds? I know this is talked about across the board at meetings now, where people are having to not go to certain things that they want to go to just because of the reimbursements. And so if you think defraying academic spending with a peer review process can be a potential compromise, vote for Hope. So this is from a executive council meeting looking at a certain journal. And here this journal is looking at profitability of about $4 million per year. And if you look at the price per article, it's a little bit over $2,000 per article.
Why so much? Oh, all the costs. What costs? Reviewing the article? Yeah, we don't pay reviewers. We guilt them into it because it's good for science. Okay, well, we gotta publish it. That costs money. It's a PDF on a website.
So in all seriousness, things keep adding up. The obligation of your time, the things that you're spending money on, and some people are profiting, while others are paying dues, paying registration fees, paying for their flights, paying for their hotels, paying to get to the airport, and you got to eat. So, really there's got to be some sort of thought process into what we're putting our spending into and what is worth our time.
You expect me to use my years of education and expertise to work for you for free. Should we start paying reviewers? Who's next?
There's always someone next, right? There's always someone else in the pipeline. And have you ever done a review for your superior? If you wish your time contributing to academic medicine had money, not academic currency, vote for Hope. So how do we counsel our mentees in all seriousness? Do you have to say yes to everything regardless? I've done a lot of reviews in my day. I'm sure a lot of you have done countless number of reviews in your day. Or do you say everything until you burn out and if you don't say no, do you get into a pressure point? And so how do we counsel them? Does getting paid make the process less work? No, I don't think it does. Does getting paid make you think that you and your time are valuable? I think there's something to that. But in general, are you concerned with the time where it's an honor for the opportunity is coming to an end?
You want to charge researchers $11,000 to publish an open access article, thereby ensuring that only researchers with the most money get to publish an article, which defeats the purpose of having open access articles in the first place. Yeah, that's right. And this is guaranteed to be profitable because researchers' livelihoods are dependent on a predatory system that values publishing high-impact journals. Hey, you got it.
So the reality is there's limited time, there's limited money. In order to keep advancing, we need to keep publishing, and they're giving us more options with open access. And as we have more options, we could publish more, but then they have to be reviewed more. And then there's a constant, sort of hamster wheel of doing this and then doing that. And unfortunately, there's just only so much time and so much money.
It's academics, baby.
So I think now you guys might be ready to vote. So in conclusion, I will be joining the Research Witness Protection Program and I will now be publishing under the name Tim Pollock. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome. Looks like you got your work cut out for you. So my privilege to introduce Dr. Wren, who is going to take the Khan perspective. Dr. Wren is a board-certified general surgeon who specializes in the surgical treatment of complex hepatobiliary diseases and gastrointestinal cancer, including stomach, pancreas, intestinal, and colon and rectal cancers. She completed fellowship training in advanced hepatobiliary surgery and performs open laparoscopic and robotic approaches to these cancers. Dr. Wren is also involved in humanitarian surgery and global surgery. She works and manages educational partnerships in sub-Saharan Africa. She is faculty fellow of the Stanford Center for Innovation in Global Health.
Well, following Dr. Hoag is really difficult. And I actually will agree with many of the things that she says, but I think there's some solutions. So I'm the no pay for peer review, and part of it is we're already paid for it. I hope I can convince you. I do have some disclosures. I am on editorial boards. I am an associate editor right now. I'm a former editorial board member of many things. And in the last 12 months, I have done many of those reviews for these cases, and as all of us are doing. Is there any data? Well, I never suffered from the lack of an opinion, but data is really hard to come by here. So this was the only piece of data that I could really find. And it was interesting, Publons, where you can put reviews that you're doing it, 17% said they selected cash or some other payment, whereas the top priority was really valuing the work that we were doing in your promotion or other way. So what are the benefits? Professional development. I have to say, being on editorial boards has made me a better writer, a better editor, a better scientist. So, and I've made incredible relationships. My first promotion letter was written by people who I was on editorial board because they knew me and they were outside my institution. So you can stay up to date. It improves your critical thinking and writing skills, enhances your own research skills. It advances your academic profile and reputation. There's opportunities for collaborations. One of the most exciting things, I've actually contacted people that I've read their papers to see if they want to collaborate because they had some really interesting stuff going on. You get appointed to editorial boards, again, professional networking. And one of the things that I really appreciate from some of the journals is they run programs like at the American College of Surgeons. I've been able to take my junior mentees and they get an intensive program from the New England Journal or something like that because I did service for the journal. Academic community benefits. There's this whole fostering your sense of academic community responsibility. Is there an ethical obligation to actually police and advance our field? I do think we have that. It contributes to this betterment of the scientific community. You engage with your peers, you can exchange ideas, and it does really help you build some professional relationships. There is supposed to be, this may go wrong at times, this quality assurance. We're reviewing because we're interested or have knowledge about this, and it should result in higher quality, credible research. There's some negative consequences of payment. Compensation might introduce a conflict of interest, especially now since you can dump it into ChatGPT. Shift the focus from this integrity to financial gain. You lose a diversity of reviewers because some people like, how much is enough? Am I going to review for $100? You know, what's getting out there? Uncompensated reviewers are probably less likely to be influenced by these incentives. Some may just say, hey, this is going to be, I'm just going to take as many as I can. Might not be doing a good quality, but I'm getting them done. And for the big journals, the ones who are charging, yeah, even there, the business model, if you're publishing like, 4% of submissions and you have to send a certain 25% out for review, that money still doesn't add up. But how about smaller independent journals, like many from our societies? They are really going to get hit by this. And there is limited evidence to show that compensating them improves their performance in any way or their time to it. So my worry is that everything becomes a transactional approach, which is sort of the death of academic good citizenship. So if we're going to monetize every single thing, How much for a letter of recommendation? How much for clinical evaluation? How much for all those committees? At what point is it part of our job that we do this? So I think that there's a lot of things in the field that are negative contributing influences to what's going on. The emphasis on scholarship everywhere has diminished the value. The pressure, more publications, you get this waste of research. How many new journals? I mean, it's endless these days. And universities just wanting more and more and more is really the publish just drives this industry that doesn't really need to be there. So let's be honest, this is the data from this year by rankings. Were there really 1,652 advances in thoracic and cardiovascular surgery that we needed to hear about this year? I severely doubt that. How about the fact that in many countries, even including from Dr. Hoag's home state of Indiana, which I found out today, you get cash bonuses. China, this was rampant, depended on the journal. And you can see Nature's really been trying to publish that this is a problem, right? So they have so-called banned cash awards now. I'm not sure that that's true. We have thousands of scientists that manage to put out a paper every 5 days, fake paper factories, this pay-to-publish system, and misconduct in paper mills. There's a lot of problems in the system. Let's talk about residency selection. It's that time of year. We see Dr. Brazel up here. Hear her thoughts on this. I love this guy, Brian Carmody, the sheriff of sodium. He's hysterical. He's a nephrologist. So look at the new articles in the medical literature where medical students are getting in there. Look at what has happened in residency selection to the number of things that medical students are having to participate in. Plastic surgery now 28.4. So the problem here is that we are fueling this arms race. It is research pollution. A lot of this stuff never needed to be done. So part of the problem, too many journals. Why? Because we're using publication number as a metric for everything. We need to redefine our jobs. Not everybody needs to write something. Everybody needs to have, maybe it's you get promoted on your clinical, your education, your quality, all sorts of things. We need to reevaluate this and ask who really does need to publish. In ERAS, we need to resist that publications are a metric. We've got to stop people from having bonuses for publications because this is the vicious circle that we're in right now. So it's very interesting. They just put this out. This is the 10th. I didn't even know these existed, but you're trying to find some data on peer review. And there's all sorts of issues going on, biases, inefficiencies, everything. And you can see this is just a few, but what's the model for peer review? Kind of talking about, I can tell you as an associate editor, I have to invite 10 people to read and review an article just to maybe get 2 reviewers back. It's exhausting for me. It's like it's exhausting to be a reviewer all the time. This bias issue, the peer review reviews. So there are some discussions, but I thought this was actually a really interesting piece I found. Are we really unpaid? At least Stanford doesn't even give you a contract. So everything is implicitly part of my vaguely defined job. Reviewing is part of your job as a university faculty member. Nothing compels us to do it or connect any kind of salary to it, but that's true for almost everything else in my job. I don't get paid to serve on a committee. I don't get paid to meet with our trainees, to do any kind of teaching, to read journal articles, to advise and mentor people, all of this. I don't get paid to back up a computer either. So this is part of our job. And I think if we could address some of those other areas, we could make peer review a better process. So I'm so glad I didn't pick the GIF of like, show me the money, the other one. I went with a dog of cars. But I do think the process needs to be changed. So thank you.
Great. It's open for discussion. Open for discussion. I'd love to hear from people in the audience and get your thoughts. Questions, comments? Sure, someone's got an opinion. Our brave president.
You had me in hysterics, Melissa. That was so funny. Because when I got to tell you that as I was listening to this, like y'all know, I spent the first 10 years of my career in academics. I was on 3 editorial boards and was reviewing articles all the time. And about a year into my work in community practice, I thought, why am I doing this? It doesn't align with my goals anymore. So I dropped off everything. So I guess my question, my statement is, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't, right? I mean, if it's something that you think aligns with what you can add to the body of literature and to help people advance their career and it's something you're passionate about, go ahead and do it. But if it's something that you feel like you got other things that are more important in your career that work for you better, then don't. We have to be a little more selfish sometimes, I think.
How? No, I agree with that. And, I went with Dr. Glaucoma Flucken or whatever, and you went with data. So you could see the answers right there. But I think the real thing is, yes, you can choose what you do, but at the end of the day, if you're going to have peer-reviewed publications, they have to be peer-reviewed, right? So, I think that's the thing with being on the editorial boards, because you could send these out and after no one reviews them, that's what your job is, then you review them, so they could go out and get reviewed. So if we're going to continue to pressure people to publish and open more access for people to publish, we're eventually going to run out of people to review those articles. So yeah, I think each person can make that decision, but then the editors, the journals are going to have to decide whether or not they have to decrease the amount of papers that they can accept, or just, as you saw the numbers that she put up there, less than 20% of papers actually get accepted. But what if they cap the number that people could even submit or put some parameters on it? So I think it's outside of the personal opinions, but it may come back to whether or not you can do the right advancement if you can't have peer reviewers do the reviews to have peer-reviewed publications.
And I really do think we have got to ask ourselves who on our faculties needs to publish. I think we need to get away from that it's the currency of the realm for everything, because it's driving insanity. And there's so much stuff in the literature that honestly just stinks and doesn't belong there.
Please.
Yeah, Jerkovich. Thanks for putting this on the panel. I thought the topic was going to be a little broader about the entire role of service we do within our community or with our residency, rather than focusing on journal reviews. That's okay, but my comments, and it's fine, it's good.
So that's going to be the next
That's
topic.
the next one.
It took up the entire time. But the question I guess I have, mostly for Sherry, I guess, is the concept of non-clinical RVUs and how each of these issues that we participate in should be accounted for at all. I hesitate to do it, and I've read all the articles and I know all the data, and I've thought about introducing it in my own institution, but I've shied away from it just because of the complexities of how to measure it and how to evaluate it and trying to get consensus to it. And then it just turns out to another non-professional emphasis that we're not professionals, we're just clock punchers, and this is part of our job. And so I wonder if you just comment on the issue of non-professional activities and how editorial board reviewing might fit in that topic.
Yeah.
So, and I'll just, to your point, so we broke it into two sections. One is purely focused on the peer review, and the next pro-con is what you alluded to, which is balancing service and clinical productivity. So I don't know if you want to hold your opinion until we hear from the other speakers.
I could just briefly say that I think that there's a way you can put it into departmental divisional comp plans, that there's certain things that are good citizenship that everybody is supposed to do. And, and if you don't do that, you actually get a ding. And if you do that, and then incentivize good citizenship that goes above and beyond. Now, the devil's in the detail there. But I do think, that was the whole point that I was trying to say. I mean, would I do more reviews? What's the dollar amount? Is it $100? Is it $200? I mean, how many people fill out those surveys we all get? Oh, for $35, it's not, that's not even worth my time, So it's a weird thing. I do think, though, that we're citizens, and there is a cost to citizenship. And some stuff really is within our job.
Yeah, I have a couple comments too. So when I was at Pittsburgh, we did have these ECUs, these like sort of education, RVU type things. And, grant submission, grant paper, blah, blah, blah went on there. And reviews wasn't part of that, and it was capped at a certain amount. And we do have 10% what we call discretionary to try and reward behavior like this, interviewing residents, interviewing med students, all across the gamut. And we consciously decided not to do peer review as part of that process, just because it's something you can't control and can't edit and so on and so forth. So there are those opportunities, but I think that most people don't usually pick that one as one to compensate.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very engaging and entertaining debate. Jamie Coleman, from University of Louisville. Question for you. What do you think is the role of PNT in our universities in this? Because if we look at it, I agree, I think that there is a fair amount of pollution happening, but it's an incentivized pollution. For when we're going up for promotion, they care about how many articles I'm writing. It's part of the reason why any of us that are involved, with books have same problem sometimes getting people to do book chapters, because it's not really looked at for promotion and tenure. Same thing with the number of review articles. So I don't know if you thought that the universities here maybe have a role in helping actually assign value outside of money for these reviews. Thank you.
I actually think universities need to define faculty lines in different ways. It can't be one size fits all. As I said, I do not believe that everybody in an academic department should have to publish. I think that there are people who will have that phenotype and drive and want to do that. And there are other people that contribute in amazingly other ways. And that's what we should be right-siding that and squaring that up with PNT.
And I think another opportunity too, as I kind of alluded to as the talk, is that we pay a lot of money to register for meetings. We pay a lot of money to be a member of societies. And a lot of these have journals. So I think that, that or SME, can be other things to defray. Because if you're going to do the registration, you're going to do the meeting, and it goes down a little bit because of that. I think that could potentially be win-win.
Hi, thanks. Dr. Glockenfecken is like my favorite
So
social
funny.
media guy.
Actually, Margot finally got to see it. I was trying to pull it up on my phone the other day and I couldn't get a signal. So that's who it is.
He's very insightful. So I'm biased, unfortunately, because I like Glockenfecken so much. But just a word of warning, if you think it's bad now, it's getting worse exponentially. Ever since step one went to pass-fail, my boss's boss declared that honors at our medical school is going to be based on publishable research. We went from about 20 or 25 papers written by medical students. This year, we're going to clear probably 140 out of one medical school that has an enrollment of 211 students. I think we're infecting people with the publish or perish thing. I think that when program directors use how many publications do you have, or if you even have one at all, that we are driving this to the asymptotic curve that's going to break our back. Now, I totally agree. I'm not against motherhood, apple pie, or research, but I totally agree with both of you who are saying this is insane. And somebody at the journal world needs to say, stop. We're not going to publish this stuff.
It's not the journal world, though. That's the problem.
It's the whole gamish.
As long as your dean is saying you can't get honors unless you put it's not your medical students. I mean, another piece of literature crap in the system. I mean, that's where this has to stop. That will begin to strangle it, right? If everybody in the world doesn't have to have publications to meet some metric, it will dial all of it back. And I mean,
I vote
you
that
need to
every
have
program director
wait, aren't
says
you the
don't have
dean
to have
now?
the publication.
Tyler, aren't you the dean?
I am
You're the
I'm the
dean.
regional dean.
You're the dean. Make
The
it stop.
the vice chancellor does it. And, this is the infection. But if the program directors would at least put out to the medical students, look, we want to know how you did in medical school. We want to know you're a good person, that you're teachable. And please don't shower us with tens of publications, because they are running for that. And, it's breaking my back at my institute, because I'm reviewing them before they go for review. So keep on it. And I agree with you, Sherry, a lot of this is citizenship, but you don't get paid for citizenship. We ought to be doing fewer reviews and more teaching of our students and trainees as part of that citizenship, with a big reward for the academic surgeon.
So Tyler is absolutely right. I was on a panel with, can't remember if it was 4 or 5 other program directors from very well-known, highly respected surgical programs. And it was a webinar, and then the students at the end got the opportunity to ask questions. I was the only program director who said, we will absolutely look at your application without significant research. Because, there are, Tyler Hughes being a great example, rural surgeons that do a lot of research and contribute a lot, but it is not necessarily directly tied to his effectiveness as a surgeon taking care of his community. And we are starting to, at the ACGME, putting my RC hat on for just a second, we are counting other scholarship. It is not just the number of publications. It is, have you created curricula? Do you work in a simulation lab? Are you out in your community on the news talking about breast cancer awareness and preventive things? That is education. That is scholarship, the scholarship of dissemination, the scholarship of effectiveness. And you are absolutely right. The problem is us
And also,
in all of our roles.
I just reviewed all the ARAS things, because, we had to pick everybody. I would say 95% of the medical schools, the entire spread on their grades in medical school was between honors and high pass. So, there's no metric right now on that piece of paper that you can really tell anything about anybody. And this is why it pushes then to this default that you're going to, if you did research and published, something, you must be, I think we just need to rethink this whole system.
Telemonte from Evanston. Let me come back to the basic topic, and that's incentivizing the peer review process. And I enjoyed both of your presentations. It's sort of the purist and the pragmatist. And on one shoulder was the good angel telling me that I should do all these things for the good of science and for the good of the university, and because I have this moral obligation to do it. And then on the other shoulder was the bad angel telling me, hey, pragmatically, I just don't have the time to do this anymore, and it's not valuable to me. So I think that's the fundamental problem, is that the truth is in the middle somewhere. So let me both ask you a question. And this comes from an observation I've had over the last few years, is that I think the peer review process is so badly broken that we need to reinvent it. Why do I say that? Because when I submit a basic science paper and I talk to a scientist and he says, well, I never do the reviews for other articles. I always give it to my grad student to do it. So that's you're not getting the real peer review, you're getting the grad student to do it. And then if you submit a clinical paper, sometimes I hear a fellow surgeon say, well, I just gave it to the senior resident review or the fellow or the research person in my lab. So again, you're not really getting peer review sometimes. So here's my question for the both of you. We're all educated professionals in this room. Everything we've done in our lives has been to be driven to be good at what we do. And now as we become professionals, we finish our training and we actually go into the practice of medicine or the pursuit of academia, we are incentivized with compensation models that actually should be rewarding professionalism in the field. And I think this is a professional activity, not something where you get a letter, you agree to do the review, and then $100 shows up in your credit card. That's nonsense. I think what's lacking sometimes, if you talk to other professionals in other fields like engineering, aeronautical science, they're paid to be on editorial boards and to be reviewers, and they're paid with contracts. And it's a highly competitive thing to be on the journal or reviewer for the journal, the law review, the Harvard Law Review. And these people don't do that for free. They're contracted to do that. And it's a competitive environment, just like we all compete for professional positions, for being professors. And their position on these contracts are based on the quality of their reviews. So the grad student's not doing it anymore. The research fellow's not doing it anymore. And yet in surgical journals, we don't do any of that. And so I'd like your opinion. Maybe we should rethink the whole process and make it somewhat of a professional endeavor where we sign contracts and our ability to renew those contracts is based on the quality of and the number of reviews that we do. And we don't even review the reviewers. And sometimes they're students or residents. I think the whole system's kind of broken, and it's not consistent with what we do with the rest of our professional activities. So Sherry, Melissa, what do you think?
I think it's funny why you're saying that. It made me actually think of something, which is as people retire, you have this incredible workforce of very educated people and everything. Professional reviewing would be an interesting thing. You made me think I must be an idiot because I actually never give my reviews to anybody. I actually do all my own reviews. So I must be therefore kind of stupid. I think it's an intriguing thing. One of the hardest things right now is people become so subspecialized. It's like, I only do left toes. I will only look at articles about left toes. You got to go find the right toe person. I don't know. It's intriguing. What phenotype of person would take that job, I think, is another interesting thing. And I think that all the journals should have professional stats reviewers right now, because I can tell you when I'm reading something and they did a reverse bootstrapped Hecklenhauser, whatever, I have no idea what that means. And I think the process really does need to change. I don't know, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, I think the culture is such within medicine that everything is service, and I think every other industry, gets paid for their time, unlike doctors, and that's just kind of how you do, and it really never ends. And it's interesting when you guys were bringing up the burnout and what you have to do as a med student. And I'm not an expert in this literature. There's probably people that are, but I wonder with like community surgeons and community surgery resident versus academic, I wonder if the burnout level is so much higher because they do want to be chair, they do want to be dean, and so they do all these extracurriculars, and the focus is like, let's get out of the hospital because I have to go home and write this paper, as opposed to let me take care of this sick patient, and that we're sort of, getting to the point where we're not prioritizing what we all went on to do as becoming doctors.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rifat Latifi from Phoenix. Tyler actually asked me to give a talk, to say something, not by asking me, but by bringing up something with medical students. So I feel sorry for everyone who's program committee or program director right now. We put, rightly or wrongly so, we put some criteria. You have to have a grade above 132 or 140 or whatever. Otherwise, you couldn't pass the secretary or the clerk. Your application will never come unless someone calls you, he's a really good guy or good gal. How are you gonna pick residents right now? Pass, fail, everyone's gonna pass. Because to fail, the governor of the state is gonna hear about it. So how are we gonna pick the best residents? I think at some point there's gonna be no gender at all in the application, gonna be some AI, we're gonna ask to pick the best residents. I don't know. And we all say, India, we need to change. I did not hear a single word, how are we gonna change it? Now, I do review for a few journals, but I actually cut it completely. No, thank you. Remove my name from this because I do not review pharmacological effects of penicillin. I'm just making it up. It takes me time to read that stupid email because everything shows up. I don't know which one's going to be more important. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but cut it yourself and don't accept to be an editorial board of some ridiculous journals. You never heard of it. Because I'm telling you, when I get those invitations, I look there and here's Sherry or Tyler, or I'm not, these are not correct, but people that I know, I have great respect for them. So maybe I should be there part two, but the journal is crap. So maybe we start with there, but for the residents, God bless you all. I don't know how we're gonna pick the residents.
I mean, I think what's happening is, as we require more, it is a vicious circle. I delete like over 20 of these a day. You should be on the editorial board of like whatever, and it's insane. I spend more time deleting emails. I wish I could get incentivized and paid for this. But I think the people who are going to have to stop it are the leaders in our field, some of whom are in this room. You know, you have to just stop. It is this vicious cycle right now, and it's just feeding. They take away a grade from the board's part one, right? Which is used to be how, and as far, literally, everybody in medical school right now is either getting honors or a high pass, so grades mean nothing. What means anything? That's the problem.
And keep in mind, we all do virtual interviews now. You don't even meet them.
No.
You know.
Yeah. Well, this could be the next pro-con debate, is how we're going to match our residents. So Val, why don't you do last comments, because we have time for the next.
It's going to be really short about Funtime LSU. So I'm just listening to this conversation, and it takes me back 10 years ago when this same different type of conversations was happening. And interestingly, most of the people that are having this conversation were sitting in that same room, and we're talking about a problem that was created by this almost same group of people, where everybody was so focused on the process and not on the product. And now we're seeing that in the medical school or even the journals and stuff like that. Again, I think people should be a little bit level-headed before the next decision is made, without thinking about the consequences of the decision. Like, hey, let's stop all these, journals and stuff like that, and then now scholarship decreases down the road 10 years and wonder what happened, because this is the sexy thing to talk about and deal with right now. It's like medical school and stuff. Caution for all educators: think about the product at the end. Any decision you make, think about the product in the end. It was so pushed by societal changes and what is cool at that time. We changed medical school, and I was asking people sitting in that room, is the product going to be better? Is the product going to be better? They said, well, it's whatever we're just doing right now, and everybody's complaining. So it's so disheartening to see same people who made those decisions now complaining about it. So I hope the next decision that is made, people actually think about the product in the end.
Yeah, thank you so much for stimulating that lively debate. So that was very focused on the peer review. We're going to expand to something I'm sure nobody will have an opinion on, balancing service and clinical productivity. So Dr. Scoggins is going to talk about free for service. That's the title he came up with. I love it. Dr. Scoggins is professor and vice chair of operations and finance in the Hiram Polk Department of Surgery at University of Louisville. His clinical and research efforts are within the field of surgical oncology with a focus on tumors of the liver and pancreas. Dr. Scoggins has published over 250 peer-reviewed journal articles and edited 2 book chapters. Dr. Scoggins has served as chair of the Fellowship Program Directors Committee in the Society of Surgical Oncology and has held numerous leadership and committee appointments in national societies, including represent our Western Surgical Association on the American College of Surgeons Board of Governors. And Dr. Scoggins currently serves, as you see him up here, in his role as a recorder for our society.
If you want to increase your publications, just send Venmo money to your buddies and ask them to give you good reviews. Thanks. So I was asked to debate my colleague, Dr. Brazel, on whether or not we should be compensated for the non-RVU work. I think that this plays into what Dr. Jurkovich was wondering about. And I'm going to hopefully convince you that we should, at least in part, be paid for our non-clinical work. When you're talking about how docs get paid, I think everybody in this room knows that we all have a compensation formula that should at least reflect in part what we do. Some of that's going to be your base salary. Some of it might be at risk. And in some institutions, that's called a bonus. You get a quarterly or yearly bonus if you do X, Y, and Z, if you exceed this number of clinic visits or these number of work reviews. So the easy one really is to compensate is the patient care, the work RVUs, because you can count those. It's easy to tabulate those. If you're doing lots of surgery and taking care of lots of patients, you'll accrue lots of work reviews and you get paid accordingly. But what about things like research, teaching, and service? And we're going to dive into this. I think that this has been talked about quite a bit, and the American College of Surgeons Bulletin even had a bit on it talking about modern compensation models just simply fall short. And we need to somehow align our incentives, i.e. our finances, to create a more equitable and value-based compensation model. Your work assignment largely is dictated by your boss and should somehow reflect what you do. And your chair or your boss usually has some influence on your work assignment, and that I would convince you is some form of incentivizing. So over there you can see a typical doc might have a clinical work assignment of 70% of their effort should be done taking care of patients. And then any mix of some of it might be education, some of it might be research, and that is adjusted based on what you're supposed to do in your department. But when you look at where the money comes from, it comes from the hospital systems, it comes from the healthcare system. And what they're really concerned about is clinical volume, because that's how they get paid and that's how they pass money along to you. And studies have shown that the overwhelming vast majority of the incentive plans are volume-based, and I'm talking patient care volume. And in fact, only less than 10% of plans involve some form of quality or cost containment incentives in their plan. So what the hospital and healthcare system is concerned about is volume. What about other types of service? There certainly can be service locally at your place, clinical directorships, residency directorships, department leadership positions. All of these things represent service that don't generate RVUs. And I would submit to you that they're very important, and we should find a way to compensate for these. There's also national service to societies like this one, or the American Board of Surgery, or the college, other things. So there's a lot of service that many of the members of the audience are involved with, and we got to figure out how to align incentives. If you take a look at clinical directorships, these are pretty easy to get a hand on because they directly influence what's going on in your health system. It benefits your health system. And many times the hospitals can provide some sort of salary support. Think about being the trauma chief or the cancer center director or the quality doc at your hospital. And if that's valuable to the hospital, they'll often assign some remuneration for that. Sometimes that might be an offset of RVUs, so instead of being 70% clinical, now you're 50% clinical, so you have a lower RVU target to reach to get your payments. What about residency directorships? You're going to hear from my colleague next, and she knows far more about this than I do because she's a residency director, but the ACGME, the body that governs this, requires a percentage of dedicated time for residency directors. And so if you have a large residency with 50 residents like we have, then you're talking about somewhere around 40% FTE equivalent is required of the program director. And if you've got some assistant program directors, then they also have required time. And those are often frequently offset with reducing your work RVU target. So we have to align this incentive to keep up with keeping these doctors earning a salary while providing a necessary role in our educational system. What about department leadership positions? Some might be the vice chair like myself, or someone might be a division director, and many times these are offset with RVU reductions. Those are decided largely by the chair or the dean of the institution. And if it's important to the department, important to the medical school will find a way to compensate for that. What about service to medical societies like the Western Surgical Association? What about service on the committee, the membership committee, or the publication committee for a service society? These it's very difficult to come up with a method for remunerating these, but these are typically accounted for in other ways. And your chair or your dean might view these as favorable for your promotion and tenure, and if so, they often will count those to your promotion. And if you get promoted, do you get a pay bump at your institution? So I would submit that they do have some minor indirect ways of compensating for that. I would add that serving the Western Surgical and sitting up here on the podium for every talk that's given is highly rewarding and adds value, and nobody gets me any money for that. But I am open for suggestions. What about service to the board? Well, many in this room have been directors of the board or like me, long-term associate examiners. It's a huge time commitment. You know more than I do. Dr. Hughes has been on the board for many years, and it's a huge time commitment. I would submit to you, this is a labor of love and for better in society. And although there's no direct remuneration for this, it's definitely looked upon favorably by promotion and tenure committees at most institutions. And if you get paid more for getting promoted, then you do get compensated for that, at least indirectly. And this is very similar to service to the college. On the college level, you have the opportunity to influence health policy and shape healthcare on a national stage. And although not directly remunerated, again, is viewed positively by promotion and tenure committees at most universities if you work for a university, and you would get remunerated for that indirectly. So the question is, how do we balance earning a salary, generating RVUs, with research and service? So we had said earlier that the problem really lies in the fact that our compensation models are outdated and based on an RVU system that's 30, 40 plus years old. And perhaps what we need to do is start to refine our remuneration models. Patient care is the easy one to quantify because you can count RVUs. But what about things like department citizenship, conducting research, teaching residents and students, administering, taking care of your administrative duties? And measures from those might include things like number of grants you published, number of publications, although that we've just discussed that might be an issue. Serving on editorial board, educating folks. All these things can be factored into something called academic RVUs, which some institutions have instituted, and I think is an exciting and reasonable way that we can start to align and incentivize for good stewardship. So, should we compensate doctors for service? I would submit to you that the answer is absolutely yes, but the caveat is to the extent that it takes time away from clinical productivity. If it benefits the hospital system, they will find a way to compensate for it. And what we really need are modern, new compensation models that incentivize other value-added activities, the things that you do every day that don't have an easily quantified RVU attached to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and taking the perspective of the joy and need of service is Dr. Karen Brazel. She is professor of surgery for the Division of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery. Acute Care Surgery is the General Residency Program Coordinator, Vice Chair of Education and Professional Development, and Assistant Dean for Graduate Medical Education at Oregon Health Science University. Dr. Brazel received her medical degree from the University of Iowa, completed her surgical residency and master's degree in public health at the University of Minnesota, and went on to complete a surgical critical care fellowship at the University of North Carolina. She's a member of the ACGME Surgery Review Committee and a former senior director of the American Board of Surgery. Her research interests include post-injury quality of life and functional outcomes, surgical palliative care, ethics, and education.
So thank you so much for the opportunity to debate, although I believe that Dr. Scoggins talking about the need for service and the benefits you get of serving has made many of my points already. This is a kind of a different talk for me. Normally I, as Sherry, am very data-driven. This is not a data-driven talk. I'm going to be talking about joy, and particularly my joy. And because you have given me the privilege of the podium, you're going to be forced to listen to it. But if you choose to walk out, I will not be offended, because as I've said, this is my joy. And I invite you to think about your own academic or non-academic lives and consider whether this matches up or doesn't match up with your joy. Because as President Shoup said, you can choose to do this or you can choose not to do this. I have no financial disclosures, but I will disclose that I have volunteered an inordinate amount of time to a number of different societies, all of which have given me an incredible amount of joy. And I'm going to define this as volunteerism, because it will help me, I think, illustrate some points. So I'm not going to call it service. I'm going to call it volunteerism. So the definition of volunteerism is the use or involvement of volunteer, read non-paid labor, especially in community services. Now, traditionally, this is talking about the communities in which you live. But again, I'm going to choose to talk about this as our surgical community, as a very, very important community. It's a form of helping, in which people actively seek out opportunities to assist others in need. Dr. Wren talked about her mentees. We have seen several students and residents who've presented incredibly well here because of the efforts, time, and investment of their mentors in their education and development as surgeons. And volunteers sustain these commitments. Don't just fly in and maybe mentor one medical student, but they continue to work with that medical student and potentially others over extended periods of time, often at considerable personal cost, i.e., they are not making money during the time that they are volunteering. One of the benefits of volunteerism is it allows you to connect with your community and make it a better place. And I will tell you, as somebody who for the vast majority of my early and mid-career was single, the chance to connect with my community and my friends at meetings all around the country was an incredibly important source, not only of joy, but of sustainment. So the benefits of volunteerism or volunteering, you gain new skills. You make new friends, you connect with old friends. It's very good for your mental and physical health and well-being. Gives you the opportunity to give something back and improves your confidence. And actually, these 5 things are data-driven, although I borrowed them from volunteering more in the community rather than volunteering in our surgical community. So I'm going to give you some examples. This is me giving a talk at the Royal College of Surgeons of Thailand in July of 2017. Front of the room was packed. I was talking about ATLS at the time. My high school self and my high school speech teacher would never have believed that I would have been comfortable at the front of the room in a completely different country. My volunteerism has given me at least the ability to appear confident when leading from the front of the room, because it is not my natural place. So volunteering gives you new skills. it gives you confidence, and it improves your mental and physical health. You can see the running group from yesterday morning, the Western Surgical Association running group from yesterday morning. And we added 2 surgical residents to the running club this morning. And again, the opportunity to connect with people. Some of the people you see on this slide are members of Western Surgical, but it's not Western Surgical at which I have done the connecting or shown to present on this slide. These are friends that I've made at Western Surgical that I connect with in other areas. And again, mental and physical well-being and the opportunity to have some time with colleagues to discuss things both personal and professional, to do a little running, and if you're in Oregon, the running at the end, you drink wine. Now, my calculation for joy is going to be different than your calculation for joy. There isn't any way to quantify that because I value different things, and I've already told you that it was an incredibly important part of my personal life connected to volunteering as I was an assistant and an associate professor. And I do not expect my chair to pay me to volunteer. But I also do not expect my chair to nickel and dime me for my time. My chair pays me to do a job and pays me to do a good job. And when I have joy and when I bring joy to work, I do a much, much better job. And so the fact that I take an hour out of my working day to take a Western Surgical Association call, it might balance the late night calls that I get from residents about some disaster or catastrophe or emergency, and it might not. But it gives me joy and allows me to not be resentful when some of my clinical and administrative work impinges on my truly personal time. So, volunteering also allows you to give back. The bottom right photo comes from a time, it comes from Hemingway's Cafe in Cuba, and it comes from a time prior to when Cuba was open to travel. A very committed group of people took ATLS to Cuba. No amount of money could have made the commitment that existed for that group of people to get stopped at customs because we had Mr. Hurt, that head, trying to get through customs in Cuba. For those who aren't trauma surgeons, it looks like a cut off head, and they thought we were bringing bodies into Cuba. So it's commitment and the joy that does that. The 2 people in the center have done as much or more for ATLS around the world. They don't get paid a single dime for any of that. So how do you incentivize volunteering? If we're saying that it is important, if we're saying that we might need to be able to try to explain that joy to the next generation, how do you incentivize it? Well, you make it easy. You offer some tangible benefits, and those tangible benefits do not need to be money. You make it inclusive, and then you say thank you. So some more friends that I have met through the Western Surgical, and again, have made my life much more joyful and much richer. So in summary, this is my tale of joy. It may or may not look anything like your tale of joy or your volunteer journey. But I will tell you, without volunteering at many of these societies, I would not be able to bring my full self to the work that I actually do get paid for. And the job that I do get paid for would be done not nearly as well. And without volunteering, I never would have met my debate.
All right, we have a few minutes. Open up the microphones for some discussion.
Yeah, hi, Mike DeMer, Newport Beach. It occurs to me that everybody up there is pretty senior, and I wonder if our younger generation looks at things differently. We'll hear about, I'm certainly more senior, so I'm sort of extrapolating what I've heard, but look at what work-life balance perhaps differently or less about a profession. So maybe that you volunteer, but you don't volunteer at work. So you could volunteer with your church. You can volunteer other ways in your community. And so I think it's not a zero-sum game of whether you're spending your time doing things for the department or for the surgical community, but you may have other things you want to do with that time, whether it's spending time with your family, other activities you prefer to do, but something has to give. It's not an inexhaustible time commodity to give to your work. So I wonder about the thoughts regarding sort of the bigger picture, and maybe even it applies to work-life balance that our younger generation might think about.
Yeah, sure. I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think the younger generation has a deeper understanding of work-life balance than our generation. I think that a lot of the younger folks view work-life balance as one of the most important things when you're recruiting new faculty, and so it's critically important to balance.
I think you're absolutely right. I actually think viewing it from an individual's perspective, it is what you choose to volunteer or where you choose to put your volunteer efforts. And that might be overseas mission trips, that might be your church, that might be coaching your child's soccer team. And if you choose to do those, you may have less time or may choose to have less volunteer time for surgical societies, surgical communities.
Please.
I also think what happens is, I call it the intangibles. That's what actually, however you choose to give joy in many ways. And people who are self-focused and just it's about themselves, you don't have as much joy. So it is that whether it's something beyond yourself, it's serving something beyond yourself, it's about service that really makes us get to that higher level and brings a lot of self-satisfaction and satisfaction in your being. Just serving yourself is like the lowest level of, it isn't as fulfilling if you look at like the stages of life fulfillment. So I know I'm not the only old enough person in this room to remember those credit card commercials, remember the intangibles. You could buy this mug for $12, but the experience of having that with your child at whatever the World's Fair is priceless. And that's what keeps us going. It's the priceless. The look on your trainee's face, the look on our patients, service to others is what distinguishes us in many ways.
So how do you?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think another way to look at that is the participation trophy era, right? I mean, I feel like I have a great life. I mean, I've gone to Rome to do this, to Paris to do this, beautiful Dana Point to do this, and all of this has just been a amount of service that you've given in whatever it is throughout your life, teaching this, teaching that. And I think that ultimately we like what we do, and that's why we volunteer to do it, and it gets us to where we are today. But I do fear that the younger generations want this without all the elbow grease, you know what I mean, that went into getting us where we are today. I think that's where the problem's going to lie in the future.
So, super comments. Now that I'm an educator, I agree with everybody. You're all great. But a word that came in the first debate translates to this one, which is monetize. As a society, as a profession, we're monetizing everything. I'm not going to do something unless I get paid. Just like I said, we're infecting our trainees with the publication problem, we're infecting them with the monetization thing. I think this is a cultural phenomenon, and what I hope we'll do in the future, because human nature has not changed. My medical students are just as idealistic. They want to volunteer. They do all kinds of amazing things. I'm sure yours and your surgical trainees do too. But we have to stand up as a profession and say, what are we? We are not people who work for money per se. We work for the betterment of humankind. And when I was appointed to the Board of Surgery, which totally changed my life, I took a 1/3 compensation decrease in order to do that. And it was the best money I never earned. So if we want to change this monetization, we have to let go of money to a certain extent. It doesn't mean we all take a vow of poverty, but it's no longer who has the most money is the best in class. And I'm afraid that's what seeped into our profession, and I apologize for the sermonette.
I agree with what Tyler was saying, and I think that this is really important because I look at these as two different issues a little bit. I mean, volunteerism for something that you're passionate about, I think absolutely we shouldn't be expected to be paid for that. I mean, it's something we love to do. Spend a month a year at the American Board of Surgery and not getting a dime for it, I think is a prime example of that. And it's almost, I hate to call it like a hobby, but it's something that it's something that we went into this field for because it's giving back to the field. And I think that's incredibly important. I wouldn't feel right about taking money for something like that personally. But there's another issue that Chuck was talking about that I think might be different. It's probably outside the scope of this discussion, but it's our day-to-day jobs of what we do. And I do think there's a real need to look at how we get paid every day. And rather than just being paid by productivity alone, I think we have to be paid by what's important to the system, not just for generating a lot of RVUs, but other things are. Patient satisfaction, community outreach, quality. They're two different issues, but I do think that our day-to-day work needs to be looked at a way where people can get compensated for things that are important other than just producing a lot of RVUs.
I think you're absolutely right, Margot. One of the hardest things, though, as you well know, you decide compensation for a lot of people. And at the end of the day, you have to have a financial compensation plan that's measurable and compensate folks based on that formula. And largely that in 2023 in America equals RVUs. I'm not saying I agree with it completely, but that is measurable. And it's what matters to the hospitals, it's what matters to the CFO at your system. And that by and large is what they're going to pay you to do.
And there have been a few attempts at using educational RVUs to set compensation or to help set compensation, and they have by and large been failures. And the reason they've been failures is once somebody gets to the set RVU, they quit, and there is still an unmet educational need, and or they will compensate educational RVUs for degree granting programs. So anybody that teaches medical students in a classroom type setting, despite the fact that we know that classroom type settings, there are not all that many medical students that show up anymore, but if you are assigned to do that, that counts. But if you are asked to go to a lab for surgical residents, because residents are also employees, that does not count. So the devil is in the details, which is why educational RVUs, except when they've been set as a citizenship, as Sherry talked about, have not worked at all.
So we have 5 more minutes to stand time, so we have 3 more discussions, so we'll probably not be able to have time for more.
Well, I'll keep it brief. Neil Butiani, MP Anderson. So like President Shoup said, I think that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive points that you guys are making, that service and kind of re-envision compensation can coexist, right, and be important. It's a timely and interesting discussion because it's something that incidentally has come up multiple times in my peer group. More and more of us have significant others who are in fields where compensation is determined differently. And when outsiders look at medical compensation, they are shocked, right? In terms of how we're paid and putting service aside, if either of you, Dr. Brazell or Dr. Scoggins, could design an ideal compensation model that would effectively compensate for working time, what would that look like?
I will again invoke President Shoup and say that it is wonderful to surround yourself with people who are smarter and know a lot more. I would be happy to be part of a group designing a compensation system because I can tell you about the educational inputs to a compensation system, but I am don't base it on learner satisfaction. And don't count educational RVUs. Some type of service, basing it on, not service, some type of citizenship approach for the educational input into a compensation model would be my contributions to a smarter group of people with a lot more financial expertise.
Yeah, Neil, as one of the 2 people that design the compensation model at the University of Louisville, I can tell you that we did our best to weigh clinical productivity, weigh educational effort as we defined by work percent based on the chair's designation, and service. We attempt in an imperfect way to balance non-clinical work RVU with other things and the model we use is with RVU offsets, so.
And I'll just make a comment that mo money don't necessarily make you mo happy. It is like, I mean, I think I'm happier than Jeff Bezos. He's got a hell of a lot more money than I have. And it's things like creation, community, all these intangibles is actually what drives you in career satisfaction. It's seeing your resident get up for that first time and, you know, do something unbelievable. You cannot put a price tag on all of this.
I really appreciate the discussion, and it's very humbling to hear such dedication and selflessness, because that's what you're all talking about. But Chuck, in your presentation, several times you mentioned the chair should have the ability to reward non-clinical productivity, because if all you do is emphasize clinical productivity, that's all you're going to get out of people. And I couldn't agree more. And I don't think money makes you happy, but I'll tell you, as a chairperson, and you mentioned that several times, I think there's a big problem coming. And I think with the reimbursement schedules changing, population aging, more patients on Medicare, the fee schedule changes that affect all the surgeons in this room, a chairman I'm worried about how I'm going to take good care of my faculty members. And when I was a young chairman and there was plenty of money flowing, I used to talk about how I had to support my faculty to do non-clinical things like research, like education, developing a surgical skills lab. Now I use the term, and somebody mentioned it to me, that I didn't even know I was doing it. Now I have to protect my faculty so that they don't take pay cuts, because that revenue stream from the hospital, their margins are down. They used to run, a 4 or 5% margin in healthcare was considered good. Now you're a good healthcare system if you can break even. So I guess my question is a bit more for Chuck than everybody, but I'd like to hear your opinions. As a chairperson, I worry a lot about the future, because if I can't take care of my faculty, I'm not going to share your right. If you wanted to be rich, don't go into surgery, right? Not the right play. But if I'm seeing my faculty members threatened with pay cuts, then Karen, they're not going to have time to do missionary work. They're going to go back to that RVU mill and generate more money. So I think there's a real storm on the horizon here. And Chuck, I'd like to hear your perspectives on what we're going to do when that money that comes from the hospital, and you said there's money from the hospital, they'll support this. I think that well's running dry, and I worry.
It's definitely running dry, and as you said at the reception, the most important thing you do in your role is recruit and retain. You recruit talent and retain them and foster them, but now you're having to protect them, and you're having to protect them financially. And I don't have an answer about what's going to happen when the well runs dry with the hospital system. If your hospital system is turning to 1 or 2%, you're in a good place. Our hospital system is largely dependent on IGT transfer money. As you saw, we're losing money to do mastectomies at our hospital. So this is a tough cookie to crack. And until there is meaningful change in the national level, I think that we're going to continue to fight and claw and find ways to pay faculty, and it's not perfect. I don't know that I have a smart answer for you.
I don't think there's a good one right now, but I would just alert everyone to the fact that the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a sea change in the way we compensate physicians, and particularly proceduralists like surgeons. And I don't think it's going to be good.
I mean, the crazy thing is the CEO of these hospitals just keep making more and more and more. There's money. I mean, what's the average pay of the CEO of a hospital now? 4 million? Yeah. Where's it coming from? Off our backs.
Tim Nelson from Tulsa. I really appreciate the panelists. It's going to get me thinking tonight. So thank you for all your presentations. I heard a talk recently, and someone described something that happened in the Netherlands. They had a problem because everyone takes their spring break at the same time throughout the country. So it was really expensive to stay anywhere because everyone was off. So parents started taking their kids the week before, and they could get cheaper prices. They thought they put a cut to that. They didn't want to make it too hard, so they charged everyone a fee. You had a penalty of $50 if you left early the week before. And suddenly, what they saw was a huge increase in the number of people who did that. And they summarized that no longer did people do it because it was good citizenship. It was now a transaction, and $50 was certainly worth the money I was going to save in terms of travel and things. So I was thinking of that when I was hearing this, and I think we have to be extremely careful to not make the things we love, and I think particularly Dr. Wren and Dr. Browse, you talked in these ways, the things we love, a transaction. We have to focus on the joy they bring us. I'm getting close to that age of retirement you meet, and I look back at my Social Security earnings, and there were these 4 years where I made $30,000 a year. Well, those are the 4 years that I lived in Cameroon, in West Africa, and just chose to have my practice be there. And I don't have any regrets. I make a lot of money. The people who train me make a lot of money. There's a lot of money for us to be making. So I think we ought to just learn to have joy with what we have.
Great. Well, to be respectful of everyone's time, we have a 15-minute break. So we'll do a hard stop now, back at 3:30. And I want to thank all the speakers.
Putting that together, a lot of fun. Thanks.
It's like,